Hey, everybody. We're just going to wait for the good folks to let everybody in so that everybody who is interested in this can join. I very much look forward to providing some hopefully pretty useful techniques that you can use to soothe yourself when you're feeling pretty stressed out. We all go through times like this. So I just am really happy to offer some more resources to people who could use them. So Shauna, are we ready to go?
We are ready to rumble, Anna.
All right, then let's do it. Basically, I thought I would start first by just explaining a little bit about the stress response system, because I think that it's really useful when we are stressed to know what are the biological systems, or at least the brain system, what's happening in there. What are some of the physiological things that are happening that are leading to those feelings of stress? So I always like to use what's called the hand model of the brain to basically show you what this looks like. So if this were my hand and this were a model of the brain, this would be the brain stem, right? And the oldest, or actually, let me say the newest part of the brain, evolutionarily speaking, is this prefrontal cortex, the part that's on the outside. But if I were to open up this, the part that would be right in the middle is the amygdala, which, if you are looking at this video here, is kind of old and inside, way in the middle of the brain. So the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala interact in some interesting ways, particularly when there is a stress response occurring. So let's say there's some stimulus that's causing you stress. Maybe it's something to do with family. Maybe it's something to do with school. Maybe it's something that's totally unrelated to those things, but it is ramping you up in some way. Often what happens is when we get triggered, when we get to the point where we just need to respond. We can't think about what we're doing. It's the amygdala, that old thing in the very middle of your brain, that is responding. And the amygdala is kind of the sounder of the alarm. It's that thing that tells you you better get into fight, flight, or freeze, and you better do it immediately to stay alive, right? So the amygdala is what is triggered when you are trying to escape from a burning building, when you realize that you're walking in a meadow and suddenly there's a pack of coyotes that's sort of stalking you. Those are the things where the prefrontal cortex will let you know that something is not right and is trying to keep you safe. The problem is, if you have a very stressful life, or if you've had a lot of trauma in your life, sometimes the amygdala can start to get overreactive. So it responds to, say, a 5-alarm fire, the same way that it would respond to smoke from burned toast. So it makes it very hard to know whether you are in a situation where you need to fight, flight to survive, or is this something where the amygdala is making this into an emergency, right? And it can be a really hard thing to figure out what's going on. But the most important thing to know is that the amygdala turns on when it needs to keep you safe and it wants to communicate something to you. Now, the prefrontal cortex, this thing on the outside, right, this newer part of the brain, that's the part of the brain that's really, really good at things like long-term planning, things like trying to think about what the consequences of your actions might be before you actually do the thing, right? So the prefrontal cortex is all of that, and it's not actually fully developed until you're age 25. So if you've ever wondered why people under age 25 can't rent rental cars, this is actually part of it. The rental car companies think, you know what, maybe not such a good idea. Their prefrontal cortices are not quite fully developed. Maybe we don't want to give them this thing that's like, a $40,000 vehicle to then go sort of try things out on. So what happens when the amygdala gets triggered is it shuts off access to your prefrontal cortex. So if you have ever been totally stressed out and suddenly you can't think about anything other than that moment right there, that's why. Your amygdala hijacked your access to the prefrontal cortex, and you can no longer think long term. You can only survive this moment right here. So you can see how that could sometimes work into your benefit, but also sometimes maybe not work to your benefit. There's something also about the stress response with students that I thought was worth mentioning. a lot of times, who here, by the way, and I just realized I don't have the full gallery set up, so I may not get to see every single person, but like who here has ever studied really hard for a test and then you take a test and you sit down and it's like poof, like cannot remember anything that you studied for. You know what I mean? You were like right there. You were like, it was on the tip of your tongue, sort of like you were just barely able to access it. And then no, you got there and you just couldn't do it. Guess what? Your prefrontal cortex, or actually it wasn't your prefrontal cortex getting hijacked this time. This time your amygdala was sounding the alarm. Exam, freak out, stress out, right? But your hippocampus is related to memory. And that's kind of through the hippocampus is where you access all the stuff that you actually studied for, right? So if you're starting to feel really, really stressed out about the test and then you sit down and you forget everything, it's because your amygdala is activated and it is shutting off your access to your hippocampus, which is where all that information that you really need is stored. So what can you do about it? Figure out what works for you to soothe yourself when you are stressed. Try a few of those techniques. I almost guarantee that you will be able to then get back online to your hippocampus and be able to access all of that information that you studied so hard for. So that is one thing I think is important to know just in terms of stress response. And the next thing, one second, is building resilience. So I think it's really, really important when we're talking about what to do when we're stressed, to know that there are ways to build up your resilience against stress. So if you know you are going into a horrible week ahead, maybe you have 8,000 things to do for work, and like another 10 assignments to do for school. Maybe you have other responsibilities with family or other things, and it's just going to be a hard week. You know it already. Well, there are things you can do to boost up yourself. There is an old saying from AA, from Alcoholics Anonymous, that's called, it's HALT. Never get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. A lot of times, if you are finding your circuits are sort of shorter, if you are more irritable, if you are just feeling really, really stressed, a lot of times all of the symptoms that are related to that stress are going to get worse if you're hungry. They're going to get worse if you're angry. They're going to get worse if you're lonely and worse if you're tired. So it's basically thinking, are there any of those 4 areas that I could sort of like boost myself up in a little bit this week, knowing I'm going into a really challenging week? Those are always good questions to ask yourself. Or if you're feeling a little bit dysregulated, you're feeling a little bit like you're about to snap, over sort of like minimal stressors, or maybe your stressors feel really big, but there's some part of you that's like, it just feels extra hard today. It could be like, when's the last time you had something to eat? When's the last time you gave yourself some water? When's the last time you talked with a friend about some stuff that was going on? When's the last time you got a good night's sleep? When's the last time you went to bed before midnight? You know what I mean? These are all things you can think of to just sort of try to boost your resilience in any way that you can when you're going to go through tough times. There is a huge, huge correlation between food and mood. So if you know you're going into tough times, sometimes, I know I was in graduate school not that long ago. I know that like during exam time, sometimes it's like, it becomes like a subsistence eating, it's like, what can I eat quickly? That's just like, I got to go now, So like, just know the better that you are trying to feed yourself, with the healthier ingredients, you're not going to get like an A+ during exam week, on your eating probably, but if you can shoot for a B, in terms of like the healthiness of the choices you're making. If you are trying to eat healthier foods, it's going to have beneficial impact on your mood and your energy levels. So just remember that. Also lean on friends and family. Honestly, one of the best things that you can do to support your mental health, honestly, is go for, get some kind of exercise outside with somebody else. Those 3 things have actually been proven to be more effective for people with mild to moderate depression than antidepressants at treating symptoms. So exercise outside with somebody else can be super useful for your wellness, especially if you're kind of stressed already, or if you know you're going to be heading into a tough week, schedule time to do that with a friend. And I promise, well, I can't promise anything, but I guarantee, I can't guarantee either, but I assure you that you will have better outcomes than if you do not do that. Okay. The other thing is sleep hygiene. That's what counselors call things you could do to try to improve your sleep, basically. Sleep hygiene is really important. There have been there's been some research basically that shows what happens if you stay up all night and cram versus if you study, and then get some sleep and then come and take your test. And you need that sleep to cement the information that you learned in your brain. If you don't sleep, or if you're not sleeping enough, it's just not as accessible. It's sort of like you took the time to file that information in there and then you can't find the file, so sleep will help sort of help you figure out where you need to go to get the information that you're being tested on, so these are just ways to make sure that you are strong while you are trying to go into tough times, or while you are thinking about just ways that you can kind of give yourself a break when you know you have tough times coming. So the next slide is all about different breaths. Have you ever heard anybody say like, just breathe, or like, now why don't you take a deep breath? Like when people say things like that, it doesn't always go over well because a lot of it is how it's received by other people, So I like to talk about breaths as being sort of like a way we can all center ourselves, but it's usually better if we're doing it for ourselves, not suggesting that other people take some deep breaths, right? So there's this thing about breathing. It's not just like people think it's a good idea, it's what you need for oxygen to stay alive, etc. When people tell you when you're sort of escalated or upset in some way to take a deep breath, it's partly because, yeah, deep breaths calm you down, but there's some biology about that. Cortisol, maybe something you've heard of before. It's a stress hormone. It's one of those things that starts coursing through your body as soon as you start to feel stressed. Believe it or not, the simple act of deep breathing, but breathing out for longer than you breathe in, actually helps reduce cortisol, the level of cortisol in your body. So if you ever need to come down a notch or two, go find some space where it's quiet, where you can do some of this deep breathing, where you're breathing out for longer than you're breathing in. And I am sure that you will be grateful that you did. So when we're talking about deep breathing, though, it's not just sort of like sitting here breathing in through your nose, but it doesn't have to be really super complicated either. If you've ever taken a yoga class, you probably know what diaphragmatic breathing is. Diaphragmatic breathing is just the kind of breathing where instead of making your chest kind of go in and out, like you're actually making your whole belly sort of, you're getting so much air in your whole chest space that it sticks your belly out too, basically. So if you were to practice some diaphragmatic breaths, it might be helpful for you to put your hand on your chest, or to put your hand on your belly, or even you can put your hand here underneath your nose to feel the air moving in your nose and out your nose, basically. But there are a few counts that you can use that can be helpful, so that when you're trying to reduce that cortisol level by using breath to calm yourself, to center yourself, you can use these rhythms to kind of remind you how to do it. So here's one of them. A 4-7-8 breath is basically where you breathe in for 4 through your nose, and then you hold it for 7, the count of 7, and then you breathe out through your mouth for 8. Now, everybody has a different lung capacity, based on lots of different factors, little kids versus adults, smokers versus non-smokers, age, all this stuff impacts. So it's really important to just listen to your own breath and what feels right. But I'd like us all to try a few of these. So let's do, like, if we could all together, do like 3, 4, 7, 8 breaths. All right. So what I encourage people to do is when you're about to do a breathing exercise, just kind of tune into your body. Like, where is your body right here, right now? Can you feel what's supporting you beneath you? Can you feel 3 points of contact with your body and what's beneath you? So I like to notice like the chair that my bottom is sitting on. I like to kind of wiggle my toes a little bit just to sort of like tune into my toes. Yep, those are attached to my body too. And sometimes I just kind of, just wiggle a little bit until you feel comfortable, And then when you're ready, you can close your eyes if you want to. You can, turn off your camera if you want to, but just, I promise, people won't be sitting there staring at you. I'd like you to just put your hands somewhere that feels comfortable for you, whether it's on your belly, on your chest, or up here, just to anchor yourself to your breath. And I'd like you to take a big breath in. So ready, breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now hold it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now breathe out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do it one more time. Breathe in for 4. Hold it for 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now breathe out for 8. So if you do 5 of those in a row, you will definitely notice yourself come down a notch. That one can be really, really good when you're having thoughts that are keeping you awake. Like if you're having spinning thoughts and they just don't go away and you're just like, shush, but they won't. Try to do some 4, 7, 8 breaths, because the breathing calms you. The breathing reduces your cortisol levels in your body. And it also gives your brain, with all this 4, 7, 8 business, you got to count, you got to be paying attention. And a brain that is paying attention to counts of breathing cannot be paying attention to the loops of things in your mind that are starting to sort of like run paths there and there, you know? Another breathing technique that can be helpful. Most people in the US have been into a 7-Eleven before. 7-Eleven is like something that's easy to see, and so it can be easy to remember. 7-Eleven breaths, I have to do these counting really fast, but let's try a couple of these too, all right? So again, just before any breathing practice, kind of wiggle in your body a little bit, like get reconnected to your body. And then again, you can put your hand on your belly, you can put your hand on your chest, you can put your hand here, whatever feels right, or nothing, just put them in your lap comfortably or somewhere else. Just breathe in through your nose for 7. So ready? Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now pause and breathe out for 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Do it one more time. Breathe in and breathe out. Those are just 2 different techniques that can be helpful. One thing I'll tell you is if counting is kind of stressful for you, if it doesn't do it for you, there's some great breathing timers that you can use. This one on calm.com is a pretty simple one. So I think, are you seeing this? Deep breathe in, deep breathe out, or do I need to share this screen too?
I think you'll need to share that screen too.
Okay, sorry. So give me
You're
1
fine.
second and I will share this one. So I just have to go to this. There we go. So this is one long breath out. It's just a visual. There's no sound. Even like right before a big meeting that you might have, or something stressful you know you need to do, this can be a helpful way. Just focus on this for a minute, you know, pull this up on your screen. This is from calm.com. It's a pretty good one. There's another one that is also really easy to use. Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to go to it first and then I'll share the screen. Get in there. This one, there are lots of different GIFs, basically, GIFs, where you can like, there's this one, you know, inhale and exhale. That's a useful visual. There are, I think that there are like 10 of them. This one is if you want to have just some pace to your breathing. A lot of times when we get stressed, our breathing becomes irregular. And this is one where it's just to remind you, okay, when I hit blue, I'm going to breathe in for 3 seconds. When I hit green, I'm going to breathe out for 3 seconds. You know, so it's just very paced breathing. It's not going to reduce your cortisol level, but it will hopefully bring some calm to you simply by getting some rhythm to your breathing. And look, if you're really into squares and triangles and geometric shapes instead of words that say breathe in and breathe out, like if you're a math person, you know, like you really like geometry, maybe this one's for you. See what I mean? Like they're just, this one, you just kind of breathe as the squiggles go around. So I'm not going to show you every single one, but like if you just look up calm breathing. You know, you're probably going to find something that's going to be useful for you. So let me go back to my PowerPoint really quickly and then get that shared. So many steps to doing a Zoom presentation. Thank you for bearing with me here. Okay. So with this one, another thing, so I just showed you the breathing timers. There's another breath that comes with a little bit of movement. And these two things actually come with a little bit of movement. And there's three, but I think that they can all be useful in different ways. You ever have a day where you just like, gosh, you just need a hug, you know? And maybe there's not anybody around who is accessible, especially like, you know, this has been a tough year we've all had. And for those of you who are single or who don't have a big social circle, like it can be really hard. And sometimes you need a hug and you can't get one from somebody else. So this can be called the world hug or the hawk hug. Kind of doesn't matter what you call it, but this is what it looks like. So basically, if you're going to do a world hug, you're basically breathing in, giving the whole world a hug, breathing out, giving yourself a hug. You can even like tap yourself a little bit here. Give yourself a little love. So try it with me a couple of times. Ready? If you want to, you don't have to. Ready? Breathe in, give the whole world a hug. Breathe out, give yourself a little hug. One more. So maybe it's not a day where you want to give the whole world a hug, but maybe it is a day when you've noticed a hawk in the sky. That's kind of a common thing here in Tahoe, right? So you can also think of this as a hawk hug. You can stretch your wings wide like a hawk and then come in and then again, give yourself that little tap on both sides just to give yourself that extra little bit of love. And you can do the same thing. Breathing out, spread your in, arms wide, breathing out that way. That's more active. Then there's one more that can be helpful. This is called redwood breathing. This is where you basically get in tree pose, right? So I'm just gonna back up here in my office a little bit so you can kind of see me. So I know I'm backlit, it's a little bit weird. Maybe that'll actually help you see. But basically you just stand in tree pose like you are doing yoga, right? Arms straight up, legs straight out, about shoulder width apart. And you just imagine that you're a redwood tree. And you are breathing in through your fingers and imagine breathing out through your feet. In through your fingers and out through your feet. So those can be some really good quick breathing exercises when you kind of just need to take it down a notch. Maybe this is something, all of these things are things that you could do just a little bit before an exam. There are also things that you could do, well, some of them, while you're in an exam, you know. I can't remember if I put this somewhere else in the in here, but if I didn't, there's one called it's called the starfish breath. We all have a starfish with us at all times. This is the kind of thing that you can do pretty easily in person. Nobody really needs to know you're doing it, right? But it's basically, you can also call this roller coaster breaths, whatever. But you breathe in and trace your hands, right? You can do this with your hand kind of in your lap. Nobody needs to know that you're doing this while you're trying to breathe through a meeting, right? Or like something else going on. Or, you know, you can just be like, I'm doing this out and about. I want everyone, and they'll be like, what are you doing? You'll be like, I'm just self-soothing. Don't worry about me. Worry about yourself, okay? Okay. So just know that those are all little things that you can do to help yourself feel better. When you are blanking and you studied for the test and it's killing you, you're blanking, don't be afraid to try some of these breaths and see then if you can access what's stored in your hippocampus, right? You worked so hard to study for that. Don't let the inability to access it stop you from doing well. These are things that can help get you back on track, okay? Some other things that you can do. Breathing is very grounding, right? But grounding is basically getting out of your head and back in your body. That's how I think of it. And a lot of times our heads can take up a lot of space. And so these are things that you can do when you're like, oh, hello, like noticing I'm living up here right now, even though I'm actually in my body, right? a few little things you can do. Some of these are sort of like just reminders to just bring you back to your body right here, right now. When you notice your brain is thinking overtime, the challenge is you might not always notice that your brain is thinking overtime, right? So the better you get at recognizing when you're sort of, I like to call it like spinning out, you know what I mean? Like when your when your brain is like really going. Um, these are things that you can do then, little tools that you can do for yourself. So you want to do something that brings you back to your body. So literally just stomping your feet and just kind of tuning into your feet and legs and how they feel in that moment can be helpful. I often do this, like, you know, when you come in through the front doors of the college and it's like there are all those rugs there and you just came through like 6 feet of snow or whatever. And so you're like stomping off your boots in the middle of like the entryway there. That's a great time to do this. You're on your way to class, you're on your way to work, whatever you're doing, stomp off the snow, maybe not right this second, but like then like tune in. Oh, what do I notice about my body now that I'm stomping my feet? You know what I mean? Oh, I'm in my body. Oh, good. I'm not just thinking about all those things I need to do after work and on my lunch break and like, oh my gosh, that, 10-page to-do list that I need to do, right? Another thing you can do is literally clench your hands, like, whoa, right? But you want to like squeeze it really hard for like 10 seconds and then release it, right? So when you squeeze it really hard, hold that tension and then breathe out and release it. So that's like a mini version of something that you can do with your whole body. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I don't know if we'll have time to practice it or not, but when you're squeezing like that, you're tensing, right? And sometimes when you tense and then you release, it helps you recognize like where else in your body you might be holding tension. Like, oh, geez, like, whoa, look at my shoulders. I didn't even know that was there. You know what I mean? So then you can try to tense your shoulders and then like breathe out and relax those. Those can be good things to do too. Another thing, maybe you're not into the clenching or the stomping, rub your hands together. You know what? You're cold, you're coming in from outside. People don't even know this is a grounding technique. They might just think you're literally trying to warm up your hands, right? It's chilly out there. So just do this and then just kind of tune in, Or I've seen people do this and then they'll put a hand on their chest or even a hand on their head, and notice like that heat transfer from your hand to your head. This might be a little bit different or a little bit tough to do, like when you're in the middle of class for a meeting or whatever, but it could be something that you do wherever you feel comfortable doing it. Another thing that can be good for grounding yourself is when I think of the thing that is like the most grounded, it's trees. Their roots go way, 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 way down. And they hold up these massive structures. Like you think about some of those incense cedars and things that you see out in the forest, and they are like, huge. Like you can't even get your arms around those things. It takes a lot to hold those things up. And it's all teeny tiny roots, right? So I think that we can benefit by growing roots too. So what I will usually do is I'll guide you through it right here for a minute. So usually what I would ask people to do is just, again, as always, tune into your body. Where do you feel your body connecting to the things around you? Is there a chair beneath you? Is there a floor beneath your feet that you can notice? I just want you to notice wherever you're sitting, try to have your feet somewhere on the floor. I'd like you to imagine right now that you are like one of those massive trees out in the forest in Tahoe. And you too have strong roots that are growing from the very bottoms of your feet all the way down, 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 through the floor, through the foundation, through the dirt, and spreading out in the dirt to securely root you to the ground. You can feel these roots unfurling and digging and pulling you closer and closer to a solid space on this earth. And at the same time that those roots are growing out of your feet, there is also a thin white line of light coming out of the very top of your head and pulling you up in a comfortable way so that you are deeply rooted by the roots on the ground and lifted a little by this white thin thread that goes all the way up past the clouds into the atmosphere and the universe and all that, just pulling you up while you are also firmly rooted So you are in your strongest space. Just take a couple of deep breaths. Breathing out for longer than you breathe in. Just for a minute, really enjoy that feeling of rootedness to the earth. And when you're done, you can open your eyes, or if they weren't closed, just return physically or mentally to this Zoom. So the growing roots can be great to do if there's something that you're feeling a little unsettled about, something that's throwing you off balance a little bit. That one can be really super helpful. This next one is something I will tell you I do on the daily, and it helps me so much. And if this is something that works for you, then fabulous. I just encourage you all really to try all of these things, because honestly, not all of this will work for you. I mean, in theory, like it should, but like every person is really different. So like you may not have the same experience of like, this was great, this did not work. But try it all and see what works for you, because then you have a bigger toolbox of things that you can do when things get tough, so that you feel like it's not just sort of like you against the world. It's sort of like, okay, like maybe in some ways it will still be me against the world, but I have things I can lean back on for when I need them, So just keep that in mind. But this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mindfulness walk or mindful shower, this is, as with all things, like there's a recipe. Some people like recipes. Some people are like engineers and like they want to know exactly how to do it. Other people are more like, they're sort of like really good bakers. People who are like, no, it's a cup of flour, not a cup plus a tablespoon. It's a cup of flour, like they like the order. Other people are like, just throw it in and see what happens. I'll be happier that way, right? I will admit that like I like to cook, but I also like to throw things in. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that's a formula if formulas work for you. You do not have to try to remember that formula to benefit from this mindfulness tuning in. Basically, you're tuning into your 5 senses. So what if you can just be walking around campus before a big exam or going into a big meeting, or it could be that you have kind of like a job interview coming up or something that you're pretty stressed about, you're on your way to. This is something that you could do on the way there. So just stop what you're doing, right? What are 5 things that you can see right here, right now? So you kind of tune in. Practice it. Think about it. Look around right now. What are 5 things you can see right now? What are 4 sensations you can feel physically? I can feel my hair on my neck over here. I can feel the chair underneath me. I can feel, I actually have like a little tickle with my eyelash right now. Do you know what I mean? Like literally just tune into 4 sensations. Sometimes it's that there's breeze. Sometimes that there's sun on your cheeks. Oh, that feels so good. We're so lucky to have that here in Tahoe, What are 3 sounds you can hear? You would be amazed when you get out into some meadow somewhere here. You probably don't even need to be in a meadow in Tahoe. Just start listening for birds. You will notice one, and then you will notice another, and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea there were so many birds in this meadow. And it's because they were all there, but you weren't tuning in. What are 3 birds you can hear, or anything else? 2 odors you can smell. I've started to notice you can start to smell the sage a little bit now. It's coming back. It's coming back. I'm pretty excited about that. I think it's even possible to sort of like smell spring in the air. You know what I'm talking about? You're like, yeah, it just smells good. That counts, Sometimes there aren't a lot of odors, but sometimes they will surprise you. I love walking down. There's a place in my neighborhood where I can go basically where it's like every night at about 7:00, it's just like garlic. You know what I mean? Like it's a restaurant that must be prepping their garlic for like the next day or something. But it's just like all you can smell for like a couple of blocks is like garlic. And I'm like, yes, because I love garlic. So I like to walk my dog around that time to be like, I'm just practicing my mindfulness, enjoying the, fresh scent of garlic on the air in Tahoe, And then you kind of think too, like, what's one flavor you can taste, When I say mindful shower, I think that the shower is a fabulous opportunity to practice mindfulness, because if you brush your teeth real quick before you get into your shower or your bath or whatever it is you're doing, and I actually wouldn't do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, too much brain work. I just literally would start to see, what's one thing I can taste? Oh, well, I just brushed my teeth, like very minty. Nice one. Oh, a little hint of leftover coffee in there. You know what I mean? Whatever. So maybe you're noticing some smells. And then in the shower, it's like you have all these smells. There's like shampoo, there's like soap. If you use conditioner, there's a third scent. My gosh, if you got the body wash in there, you're living large, like there's just so many different things coming at you. You can feel how slippery the soap is. You can feel how warm the water is. Maybe you like cold showers, more power to you. You can feel the cool water coming down. So it is sort of practicing this mindfulness in the shower can be super helpful in terms of just grounding you. And a great piece of advice I heard in a training once is like, when you're in the shower practicing mindfulness, make sure you're in the shower. How many times have you been like sudsing up your head thinking about like that thing that somebody said, or like that date that you have coming up, or like that big assignment in your English class that you're like dreading because you haven't read the book yet, or like whatever it is, When you're in the shower practicing mindfulness, be in the shower practicing mindfulness with your mind, body, everything, you know? It's just a reminder your attention will wander. That's natural. You don't have to judge yourself when it wanders away, but just be like, oh, look at you, attention just going off. Come on back. Come on back. Talk to it like you would talk to a friend, you know what I mean? Or a small child who was getting distracted or something. You wouldn't yell at it. Get back in the shower. What's wrong with you? It's probably not going to help you. So be kind to yourself above all else. And remember to use mindfulness and use your 5 senses. Just go on a walk and start noticing things you can smell, taste, hear, all those things. I bet it'll help. So that's grounding yourself. Grounding, some of these visualizations, some of this breathing is all a form of mindfulness. Mindfulness, all it really is bringing yourself to the present moment. People get really stuck in the future, worrying about what's going to happen. People get really stuck in the past. Again, I call it tripping about the past or tripping about the future, right? It's really easy to trip on either one of those things. So mindfulness is that thing that pulls you into the present moment, right here, right now, which is the only moment you have any power over. It's the only thing you can truly do anything about. If you're in school, you're shaping yourself toward a more educated and more opportunities in your future. So you're making changes to influence your future, but you don't have any direct power over the future the way that you do in, say, do I want to have an apple or do I want to write with this pen right now? You know what I mean? So it's like mindfulness brings you right here, right now. Same with meditation. Not all things that are mindfulness are meditation, but all meditation is practicing mindfulness. So if you're looking for a way to kind of calm yourself, have a few moments where you can bring yourself down a few notches and get rooted in this present moment, sort of get your access to your prefrontal cortex or your hippocampus, kind of soothe your amygdala response. These are all great apps that can help you do that. So I would definitely encourage you to check out some of them. I haven't used all of them. And I know that there's a kind of a newer one. This one, My Life, is relatively new and it's kind of being advertised a lot. But the thing I like about this one is that it not only encourages mindfulness and the practice of mindfulness, it also encourages people to identify how they're feeling. Because that's one thing that has always sort of surprised me as I've grown in my profession, is that I sometimes have to back up a little bit because I'm so used to feelings and I'm so okay with expressions of emotion and like feelings are my thing. You know what I mean? So like no weirdness about feelings here, but I know that some people they're not even sure what fear feels like in their body. They're not even really sure what happiness feels like in their body. So My Life can actually be something that helps you not only practice mindfulness, but it pairs a mindfulness practice with a feeling that you're feeling. So first you have to identify how you're feeling. That's why I like that one. So take a look at these and see if there's anything that could be useful for you. I definitely have experienced 10% happier. I definitely have experienced headspace. I've looked at the Calm one, but I don't have experience with all of these. So I'm not like selling them, but or recommending them directly, but saying, check it out, see if anything works for you, because often they're free, you know? Okay, so this is for when you are really living on the edge, you know, like things are getting intense. There's a whole form of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy. And this is from dialectical behavior therapy. These are very specific strategies that you can use when you are really, really revved up. And nothing that you've done so far has been helpful in reducing your feelings of distress, whatever it's about. Um, so, of course, when I say living on the edge, like I like to think of it as like you've tried everything else is not working. You know what I mean? And so that's what I mean by that. This number one. So also I want to say with dialectical behavior therapy, there's a ton of acronyms. Like in fact, with a lot of counseling, it's like acronym soup. But this one is TIP. So the T stands for something, the I stands for something, and the P stands for two different things, right? So it's just an easy way, hopefully, to remember it. The one I wanted to talk about most, though, is this first one, tip the temperature of your face with cold water. So what you may have noticed is when you start to get escalated, when you start to get stressed out, a lot of times there's not only like a mental reaction, but there's a physiological response too. A lot of times your heart will start beating faster, your breath will get irregular. Some people hold their breath when they're feeling really anxious or stressed out, you know, or if they're about to like feel like they're going to hit a panic attack or something like that, they'll hold their breath, and then it makes it worse, right? Because then you feel like, I can't breathe. Of course you're going to feel anxious if you can't breathe. But this is actually saying there is a way to skillfully try to put on the brakes when your brain is trying to do everything to not put on the brakes. You know, when your brain is running off the rails, this is when a time when you can hit the brakes if you can't do it in other ways. Basically, what you do is you get a bowl, you put in some ice and some cold water, or one of those like zip top bags. You put in ice and cold water. You lean forward and you put your face in the cold water, or you hold the cold ice and water up against your face while you're leaning forward for 30 seconds while you're holding your breath. This might sound a little bit nutty, but what this does is it activates. Oh, and don't do this, by the way, if you have a heart condition or if, you know, like you have low blood pressure or something like that, or if you have an eating disorder and your body weight is really low, this can be dangerous too. So check with your doctor if you're not sure those things apply to you. But when you hold your breath and apply cold water to your face like that, it activates something called the dive response, which is basically if you dive into cold water, you have to hold your breath, and your body is sort of a little bit worried that you might be drowning. And so it wants to do everything it can to make sure that it's going to keep you alive. Your body doesn't have extra energy to waste if it's drowning, so it cannot have a rapidly beating heart rate. That's just not going to work, right? It also needs your breathing to not be so like energy, taking so much energy. So that's why you hold your breath in this, right? And also when you're not breathing, yeah, your heart rate will slow down too, so that the limited oxygen that you do have is able to get through your body. Your body actually goes into survival mode when this is happening. But the reason that that is helpful is it can calm the physical signs of stress that can then get your brain online. Like, oh, yeah, we don't have to be totally flipped out about this right now. You know what I mean? So you can't put the brakes on some way. This puts the brakes on your body. And this is like when people are like arguing with their partner and things are really escalated, they'll be like, I need a 10-minute timeout. And then they go doing this. And then they're like, okay, like I can do this again. You know what I mean? Or this is something that people do if they're thinking about doing something else. Like let's say, for example, cutting or some other kind of self-harm has been something that has been a way that you have dealt with stress in the past. If you're having an urge to do something that you feel like maybe you don't really want to do, or you're having an urge, let's say you're trying not to use alcohol and you're having a really strong urge to use alcohol that's really making you feel like, oh, you know, try this instead. See what happens. Another thing you can do if you're not in a situation where you can just like go do the ice thing is if you need to distract yourself quickly from doing something that you feel like you might regret later, go grab a piece of ice, hold it in your hand, and try to think about anything else other than that piece of ice in your hand. It ain't gonna happen. It is very hard to focus on anything else when you have a frozen thing in your hand. Grab a piece of snow if it's in the middle of the winter on your way into class. If you're just spinning on a test that's coming up, hold on to that and try to sort of ground yourself with your body. It's a grounding technique, like technically. Try that. The other thing you can do is intense exercise. So if you have all this excess stuff going on inside of you and your brain is working overtime too, go for a 10-minute jog. Go walk around the soccer field twice. Go just do something for like 10 minutes that gets out some of that energy so that you can then have a little bit more sort of ability to mentally control things. Because when your body just has all that energy going on and it needs a little bit of getting it out, your brain's not going to do it's not going to be as effective, get rid of that energy. The other thing you can do is paced breathing. That's the first P. A lot of the things that we have been talking about in terms of like the breathing are really paced breathing. So anytime you're putting a pace to it, because a lot of times if you're stressed, maybe you're not breathing deeply enough. If you oftentimes too, breathing can get very shallow, or like I said, people hold their breath sometimes when they get stressed out. Do you ever like all of a sudden realize like, wow, like I was holding my breath, like I didn't even know? Like that sometimes happens to me too, So when you notice that kind of thing, that's like, oh, okay, need to get a little bit of rhythm to my breath. One super easy way to get rhythm is to look for anything around you that could be square or rectangular, and then follow it with your eyes. So I have like my napkin right here, right? I love this napkin. So you basically go from one corner to the other. So like I could be looking up at the picture on the wall right here and tracing it with my eyes. And just when I get to each one of the corners, I'm breathing in or breathing out, that can help you. So it's sort of like breathing in to the count of 4, breathing out to the count of 4, breathing into the count of 4, like as you kind of go around a square, So that's square breathing, paced breathing. The other thing is paired muscle relaxation. So let's see, checking on the time. I'm not sure if we have time to go through this whole exercise of paired muscle relaxation, but it's similar to what I was talking about with those clenched fists, but you're doing it with your whole body. So basically what you would do is, I'll kind of give you a little taste of it. I won't lead you through the whole thing, but I'll give you, lead you through the beginning of it. So you might know how to do it for yourselves if you wanted to. So again, with anything that you're doing that's kind of like mindfulness based or sort of like trying to calm yourself, get back in this present moment, you just want to tune into your body for a minute, wiggle around, kind of, feel your toes on the ground, feel the chair beneath you. And you want to be doing deep breathing while you're doing this too. So you want to be like breathing in and breathing out. What you're going to do first, I want you to just focus on your feet. So I'm going to say go. And you're going to clench up every muscle that you possibly can in your feet as hard as you can while you're holding your breath. Okay. You're probably going to hold it for like 10 seconds or so, and then you're going to let go and breathe out. So ready? Breathe in. Now squeeze your feet as hard as you can and hold it. And now breathe out and let it go. Now I want you to think about your lower legs, just your calf muscles. We're going to do the same thing. So breathe in. Now clench up your calf muscles as tight as you can. It should be a little bit uncomfortable. And release those. Now do it with your thighs and maybe your butt muscles too. So it's kind of like all those muscles in your thighs and your bottom area too already. So breathe in. Now squeeze those legs. Sometimes the bottom part of your legs will get engaged too. Like that's okay, no big deal. Don't worry about it. Now breathe out. Now I want you to do it just with your arms. Like show me your your arm, your whole arm, all the way from here to here. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Squeeze it tight. And now release it and breathe out. Now try to do it with your chest and your neck, right? You can even, maybe we'll do it all in one too. Also your face. So like clench your jaw, Squinch up your eyes, do whatever feels like tension and holding it in your chest and in your face. Alrighty, so 1, 2, 3. And release. Now I want you to do it with your whole body. Okay, you're going to tense your whole body. All right, so ready, breathe in. Now tense your whole body the best that you possibly can. Tight. 5, 4, 3, 2, and release that. So we did like a real short version of a paired muscle relaxation. You can start just with your toes, go up just to the base of your foot. Like you can do it in very small little chunks, all the way from your feet to the top of your head. Or you can do just large muscles, or you can do just small muscles. Like the most important thing is that you are over and over tensing, feeling what it feels like to tense, and then releasing and feeling what it feels like to release. Because a lot of times when we're stressed about something, we're holding tension in places that we may not even know that we hold tension. Hips can be a place where a lot of people hold tension, where it's like you wouldn't necessarily know that that's there. Like people get sore backs or sore necks or sore whatever, but tension can kind of live anywhere. So this is just an invitation to remember how good it feels to let that out, let it go. All right. So all the tip skills, remember tipping the temperature with that ice water or holding the ice if you don't have the luxury of doing that whole thing, intense exercise, paced breathing, or that paired muscle relaxation where you're tensing and releasing. All right. Those are all things that can really help. Whoops. Sorry. And now we'll go on to, I just want, sometimes like we could all use a little bit of extra support, you know? And some of these things, like if you're stressed about things that maybe aren't related to this, like let's say you're worried about school. Well, it can also be hard to worry about school if you're not sure where you're going to eat tonight, or if you don't have a place to stay. You know what I mean? Like basic needs. Like for those of you who are familiar with psychology, there's this thing called Maslow's hierarchy. It's like a triangle, right? It's like this theory that makes so much sense because it basically says at the base of this triangle of trying to survive are things like food, shelter, you know, people who care about us. It's really hard to sort of be working your way up the triangle to sort of reach your pinnacle existence if you don't know where you're going to sleep that night. So it's sort of like we're working on the base of the triangle before we can move up to those sort of like higher level things. But these local supports could help you meet some of those needs at the base of the triangle, kind of those basic needs. If you need food, there are so many resources in town. I don't even know. I think there used to be like the Wildcat Food Pantry. Like that might even be a thing still. I'm not sure. But if not, there's so many resources in town too. Bread and broth, that's like fresh foods. They do it twice a week. It's all based on how big your family is. If you're a family of one, you still get great fruits, vegetables, milk, meats, like all those things. Human Health and Human Services. They can help you sign up for what used to be known as food stamps, right? CalFresh or SNAP benefits. Like there's so many different names for all of these different things. If you need help with insurance and you're low income, they can help sign you up for Medi-Cal. So Health and Human Services, be persistent, you know, but access support for sure. It's a good place to call if you need some help. Tahoe Youth and Family Services, Sierra Child and Family Services, those places both provide some support with counseling. Tahoe Youth and Family Services also has some support for people who might be homeless or who have some other needs. So see if there are places that can help you. Also, if you need childcare, Catalyst Community is a great place to go. They used to be known as Choices for Children, but they can help link you to places that have open slots that either have affordable programs or there are grant programs that can help support you. So they're great if you have children, you could use some help with that. Barton Community Clinic, great place to get some support with your medical care. You can also access, if you go into Barton Community Clinic and you have Medi-Cal and you say, you know what, I need some help with my mental health, they can refer you to get counseling that's paid for by Medi-Cal. So I want you to know that too. And WIC, if you have kids between ages 0 to 5, or if you're pregnant, they can just help with access to food, basically. So they, you can basically get like so much food per month, basically, with their assistance for free. So sometimes if you have those financial things set aside, it can open up some space in your budget for something else that you need to pay for. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's not like, oh, it's not so much that I need food, but if I didn't have to spend this much on food, then maybe I could cover my rent, or maybe that would mean I would have money to pay this bill that came up that I had no idea my car would need new tires, or like, whatever is unexpected. It can kind of help bridge gaps. So think of it like that. I always want to say too, since this is about like how to soothe yourself when you are stressed, there may be times when none of these things are working, where you've tried everything and it's just not getting better. If you're having thoughts of suicide ever, just know that that is a symptom of depression, but it's also something that you should tune into and take seriously. Because if things are so bad that you're starting to think about suicide, it's probably a good time to reach out for some support. There's the crisis text line. I've had a lot of people experience good things with that. There's the suicide prevention hotline. That's a phone call, but it's 24/7. And there's also the Trevor Project. So if you or someone you know is part of the LGBTQ plus community and they could use some support, direct them to the Trevor Lifeline or the Trevor Text. It's specifically for LGBTQ plus youth who are in crisis. The other thing is, though, if you are having thoughts of suicide, and it's not just thoughts, it's kind of gone beyond that. You're starting to think a little bit about a plan, how you might do it, or when you might do it, or with what, or whatever. If that's starting to happen, you either need to get to the emergency room, the closest one to you. Here in town, that's Barton. Where you live, it might be different. Or call 911 and they can transport you there if you can't get yourself there safely. It's really important that we make it okay to talk about this stuff. I talk to people all the time about thoughts of suicide. Having thoughts of suicide doesn't mean that you will die by suicide, but it does mean that there are some risk factors there. And if you're noticing it, it's time to reach out for help. And there's nothing wrong with having thoughts of suicide, and there's really nothing wrong with reaching out. The hardest part, I think, is when people are really struggling. It can be hard to reach out. You kind of sometimes don't want to admit that things are as tough as they are. But you can also be a good friend. If someone is telling you, hey, I'm really struggling and these thoughts of suicide are coming up, help link them to a supportive professional who can help get them what they need. So link them to the counselors at LTCC. They can do referrals. Link them to, I bet almost anybody in student services, or that's probably not even what it's called anymore. It's like student support or whatever. I am sure everybody there cares about LTCC students and wants them to do well and wants them to be well. So if you're not doing well or you're not feeling well, let somebody know so that they can help you out, because I know people want to. So I know that we are out of time. I appreciate the time that you have spent with me tonight, but I also did want to give like just a minute or two if anybody has any burning questions that they would really, really like answered. Anybody have any questions? All right. Well, if there are any questions that come up, I work at A Balanced Life, and I am more than happy to meet with people in the community. So I'm a counselor too. And if you know of anybody who could use some support, refer them to any of the counseling supports we have in our community. For such a small community, we actually do have kind of a lot out there. So I think there could always be more. And I hope some of you are going to be a part of that in the future. But we can all help support each other, both by sharing these skills or sharing these resources and support. So thank you for being part of a community that cares about mental health. And thank you for being interested in trying to learn some tools that will hopefully make things a little bit easier for you. So we're all trying to do the best we can, and we can all be doing better. And I think that those two things can be true at the same time. So I wish you all well. Have a great this quarter. Okay.